pronunciated correctly.
No.
It's so confusing.
Coming alive.
Coming alive. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission for Monday, March 11th. Let's have a roll call.
Commissioner Baca?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Commissioner Chorin? Here. Commissioner Lemke?
Here.
Commissioner Stoker?
Here.
Commissioner Parrish?
Here.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer?
Here.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Here.
Mayor Abendroth?
Here. We have a quorum. Boy, we have everybody here. First item is the minutes of February 11th.
See that?
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is a public hearing for Legacy Pools and Hot Tubs LLC. The applicant is seeking conditional use grant approval for a hardware store to allow the retail sale of hot tubs, saunas, and pool spa supplies for the property at 6619 West Mequon Road.
Make a motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to go into public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in public hearing. Does anyone here wish to speak about Legacy Pools and Hot Tubs? Seeing none.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is now closed. Papula.
Thanks, Mayor. If the commission recalls, the applicant was before the commission at the last meeting for a determination on the proposed use. The commission determined at the last meeting that the retail sale of hot tubs, saunas, pools, and spa supplies would be allowed as a hardware store, or hardware use, which is a conditional use in the AC Arrival Corridor District. There are some factors to consider when we're looking at conditional use grant approval. And one of those is that the proposed use shall not endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare of the city and the neighborhood. Staff believes that the use will not create a public health or safety issue. All sales will take place within the building and will occur between the hours of 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. Another factor is that the proposed use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting properties. The land use plan does designate the site as town center, and the property is zoned AC Arrival Corridor. Adjacent properties are zoned AC, town center, and RM, multiple family residential district. Hardware stores can be considered compatible with the land use designation and then the expected uses in the area. Again, all of the retail sales will occur indoors. The floor plan shows a 1,700 square foot showroom and then 200 square foot office, and 100 square foot will be dedicated to a closing area and break room. On the floor plan that is shown, it's a little cut off here, but the applicant did show a location outside, 16 square foot space on the sidewalk to be dedicated for commodity materials such as salt or sanitizer, so that it's easy access to the customers. Based on input that staff received from the last Planning Commission meeting, staff is adding a condition that no outdoor storage or display is available on site, and that a revised floor plan shall be submitted to not show any outdoor storage on the floor and site plan. Staff is also adding a condition that the use shall comply with the requirements of the AC Arrival Corridor District, which includes window area requirements, and those are included in the staff report, and a copy has been provided to the applicant. The proposed use and activities, staff believes, will be harmonious with the surrounding areas, which include commercial retail sales services, senior living, and multifamily also surround the neighborhood. Again, the proposed hours of operation are between 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Access to the site will come off Mequon Road. According to the zoning code, 8 parking spaces are required for the use. The site has a total of 44 parking stalls, which staff believes is adequate parking for the site. The applicant has also indicated that there will be no overnight storage or parking of vehicles associated with the business, and that deliveries will occur occasionally on site, but those will be between the hours of operation. So staff does recommend approval of the conditional use grant based upon the conditions in the report.
Thank you, Papula. Is the applicant here? No?
It's there.
Oh, you can sit at the front.
Yeah, sorry.
I guess my only question would be, do you have any comments on staff's
No, I
report?
don't. I do have a copy of the the revised plan without the outdoor storage on there for you,
Great.
for the commodity items, so we can work around that. Everything else looks like it's the way it's going to happen.
Great. Okay. Alderman Strelczyk.
Well, I'll start out. I'll make a motion for approval with staff conditions.
Second.
Motion and a second.
I do want to bring up a discussion item on the hours. I think the hours are fine, but you start at 10 a.m., and I'm concerned that with a conditional use grant, you really can't open or take delivery before 10 a.m. FedEx typically, if you need an overnight package, is coming before 10 a.m. So my consideration is I would recommend maybe shifting those hours to 9, whether you intend to have store open at 10 or 9. I'd recommend at least just saying 9 a.m. to allow for deliveries. You can't control when those drivers are always going to show up. I think the biggest thing, with staff recommendations is we don't want to see things coming in at 6 a.m. with a semi and loud noises outside and not knowing, where to get a freight delivery. But I think just from a delivery standpoint, I'd be okay with even that or store hours starting at 9 a.m. if the applicant would choose so. So I'd make that additional recommendation if that would be accepted in the second.
Yes.
Okay, so hours of operation are changed to begin at 9 a.m.
If they choose. You can be open
No,
at
9
10
a.m.
if you
is fine.
choose as well.
9 a.m. is fine.
Makes sense. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Conditional use grant is approved.
Real good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Next item is under regular business, Boulder Venture for Associated Bank. The applicant is seeking sign waiver approval for a second wall sign waiver approval for a wall sign that exceeds the height requirement, and building and site plan amendment approval to amend a condition of approval that prohibited signage in the glass tower for the proposed two-story, 7,600 square foot financial institution building at 11223 North Port Washington Road.
Thanks, Mayor. On January 14th, the Planning Commission approved building and site plan approval for Associated Bank, and then they did deny a sign waiver for a tower sign at that meeting. As a condition of approval, the Planning Commission added a condition that prohibited signage in the tower. The specific language and condition is that there shall be no sign located within the glass tower, and the storage of any equipment in the tower vestibule shall be prohibited. Now, the applicant is before the commission today to request a building and site plan amendment to revisit the tower sign. In addition, they are asking for a sign waiver to allow for a second wall sign on the north facade, and then they are asking for a sign waiver to allow the east elevation wall sign to exceed the 20-foot height requirement. Just a clarification, although the applicant is bringing two sign waiver requests forward for an additional wall sign and a tower sign, they are seeking approval for only one of the signs. They is not requesting both the tower sign and second wall sign to be approved. Now, we're looking at three separate requests tonight. In your report, we indicated the following actions that can be taken. The commission may approve with conditions, or deny the amendment to allow for the tower sign. The commission can approve with conditions, or deny the second wall sign on the north facade. And the commission can approve with conditions, or deny the height waiver to the wall sign on the east facade. And we'll get into that one a little later. Again, the applicant has indicated that although the tower sign is before the commission this evening, they understand that there is limited support for the sign based upon the building and site plan approval. They would be satisfied with the north wall facade side, but since they're bringing the request forward, they wanted the opportunity to view both signs at once. They did submit two options for the tower sign, if I can get this up here. One of the tower signs is a double-faced wall sign. It's 107 square feet. The second option is a cube tower sign. It's 49 square feet per face. The cube sign is proposed to be illuminated by can lights within the tower, and then the double panel sign is proposed to be internally illuminated. Now, the applicant has indicated to staff that there's a green banding, which was approved at Planning Commission. They've indicated that green banding would be illuminated. At the previous plan reviews, they did not indicate on plans that the green band would be illuminated. Therefore, the illumination of the green band is not approved at this time. So we're also bringing that forward since we're bringing a building and site plan amendment forward. So the Planning Commission may take into consideration the illumination of the green banding as they are also reviewing the building and site plan amendment for the tower sign this evening. The second sign waiver is for the north wall facade sign. Per the zoning code or the sign code, the property is allowed one wall sign. The proposed sign meets the size requirement. It is 57 square feet. However, it exceeds the height requirement of 20 feet. The sign is proposed at roughly 30 feet in height. Staff does not believe that there's a site-specific hardship that would warrant a sign waiver for the north facade sign. The applicant has indicated that the request for this additional signage is meant for southbound traffic because of they're placing the drive-through in the rear and moving the building back. They believe that, and the tower element, they believe that the proposed east elevation wall sign is not visible until vehicles have are already in front of and adjacent to the building, and they would have already missed the access drive. So that is really one of the main reasons for the sign waiver request. However, staff believes that the issue of visibility can be resolved with a freestanding sign, which is permitted by code. On the property would be permitted one freestanding sign up to 50 square feet in area and 10 feet in height, and that's allowed per the sign code. The applicant did submit a list of developments to staff. These developments have been allowed to have two wall signs. Staff did go through the list, which is included in your report, and did not find that any of those developments really relate to the current one we're looking at here, which is a standalone building fronting only one public street. And then the sign waiver for the east elevation sign, again, is just for the height requirement. Staff did give some recommendations on how they could meet that height requirement, but the applicant has already indicated that they will just lower the sign to meet the 20-foot height requirement. So I believe that will be resolved easily. Staff is recommending denial of the sign waiver for the east elevation sign due to lack of specific hardship, but the applicant has indicated that they will lower it to meet the height requirement. Staff is recommending denial for the second wall sign for the north elevation based on lack of site-specific hardship and lack of unique physical condition of the site. And staff is recommending denial of the building and site plan amendment to allow for signage within the tower.
Thank you, Papula. I take it to the applicant. Do you have any response to our staff recommendations?
Hi, good evening. Robert Schmidt with Boulder Venture. I'm joined by Kurt Smith from Boulder Venture and Andrew Kerr from Rinka Architects, who represents Associated Bank. I want to thank the Commission again for their continued attention to our project, as well as staff for their continued work for it. When the plan came before the Commission in January for approval, it really came forth with Associated Bank's corporate branding, which is the tower element with the cube sign in it, and only one wall sign on the east elevation. And we weren't prepared for that tower sign to be eliminated at that point, which is why we're back before you tonight. What really necessitates this is really twofold. It's the corporate branding the Associated Bank has worked for to establish in the Wisconsin market, and we provide some examples, I believe, in your packet of other communities around Milwaukee, like Brookfield, of existing branches that show that tower element is really key, and I can let Andrew Kerr speak more to that. And so it's really about bringing forth and reinforcing that corporate brand element that they have in other markets. And secondly, when the tower signage was removed, we found out later after that plan commission that we really didn't have any visibility to the building from southbound motorists on Port Road. Because our entrance driveway is well north of the building, we have a condition where a motorist unfamiliar with the building may not identify it until it's past our driveway, which could cause them to make an unsafe traffic movement to try to brake suddenly to get into the development, or possibly to brake suddenly to maybe get into the PNC driveway if they thought they may be connected. So we really think it's important to have some identity and corporate name on the building that's visible for southbound traffic. And we understand the east elevation sign is hidden behind a design element of our own doing, but again, you can see by the images in your packet that this is an investment that Associated Bank makes in really all of their locations. I'll see if Andrew has any follow-up comments.
No, I'd just like to add to that, as we were flipping through the images of other Associated Banks that have been built in and around the tri-state area, the towers that are on those, because they're one story, are significantly smaller. They're about 10 by 12 in nature. So the cube that you're seeing there would be the same size that we're proposing for the Mequon site, but proportionally to the size of the tower itself, it would be proportionally the size that you're seeing there in the renderings. It's only about 6 feet wide, and these make it look like it's a little bit wider than that. The material of the cube is a cellular plastic material with a graphic applied to it, so it is semi-translucent. Staff mentioned that it's illuminated by the can lights in the ceiling. I wouldn't say that the sign is illuminated per se. What I would say is that there's light in the ceiling to light the tower, and in the process of that, of course, the cube gets some light that falls on it as well. But it's not illuminated in the sense of a classically internally illuminated sign.
Commissioners, first question. You're permitted a freestanding sign. You did not submit one. Do you plan on putting up a freestanding sign?
I think it depends on what's approved tonight. The real desire, the number one desire, is to have some sort of a tower element sign. And if we can't get a tower element sign, then we would look at submitting some sort of freestanding sign at a later date.
It seemed to me that a freestanding sign would identify the building and its use better than the wall signs do for traffic. They would see that freestanding sign.
Yeah, I think having the sign on the building itself, from Associated Bank's perspective, having the sign on the building itself is preferable from both from a branding and a visibility standpoint. So that's what they've asked us to try to achieve here tonight.
Alderman Stelchak.
Kind of piggybacking on what the mayor said. I was very adamant in the last meeting about the tower element sign. You've exceeded the height of what's allowable in the city. It is a sign. Your intent for it is signage. It's not just a simple something that just happens to be there. I don't support illuminating the green band. I don't think that fits our architecture. And as you're trying to define your brand as in a building, I know that may work in some communities, but as you came forward with that grand concept, I can't imagine that you figured that that would be acceptable in all communities. Mequon's been prided with a higher level of architecture than other communities. We've also been prided with, really high quality buildings that have gone in, things that are going to be a little more timeless. And I don't feel that illuminating that tower element or putting a large sign that exceeds our sign code up in that tower element fits what Mequon, has designed in their code. So we need a strong reason if we're going to accept something to go beyond our code. But I also just don't feel it fits the community. And as you guys listed a bunch of different examples, you failed to look across the street at McDonald's. McDonald's brand is the large golden arches. However many billions served was what was there. And you look at that building, they've got a small golden arches. People find that facility without any problem. They go there, on a regular basis. They get in, they get out. There's no traffic issue that's associated with it because they don't have a giant sign on the side of the building. And, look again, at Mobile and everything else and all the other buildings across the way. They're a little more downstated than what you've seen in some of the other communities. The buildings that you listed as identified as what you've built in other communities, I'm really pleased with what staff came forward with. Those don't fit Mequon. They don't match any of the architecture anywhere within our community. If you look at Port Washington State Bank and what they just put in at Thiensville, brand-new building, I mean, that is just, you know, solid brick, really high, rich. They didn't have to over-brand and over-logo, but people know that it's there. And you can't come forward to a governing body and claim hardship that people aren't going to see your building when you're allowed a monument sign that'll direct them to your driveway and your building, and claim that you'd rather have it on the side. You're intending on logoing up a building, making it a very large brand station at the expense of a variance on our policy. I drove through since we talked on the phone today. I took your call, and we did have a nice conversation, but I drove to all those other buildings that you listed. 80% of them were part of a master sign plan. The master sign plan in a multi-tenant facility comes forward, and they work with staff to figure out what the best overall is signage for the community. Taco Bell has a little bit bigger bell, and Jimmy John's has a JJ on the end. It kind of bookends it. It actually fits the building. And then if you look down below, the Jimmy John's was smaller than the other wall signs, and that was minimized in size, and so was the word Taco Bell. Johnson Bank has got an inward facing. It's part of the Cafe 1505 complex. It came forward with that. Several of the other ones are also part of multi-tenant facilities. The only exception that I saw might be Wells Fargo. I don't think we should have approved the second sign over their drive-through. But I wasn't here to vote on that, and I'd vote against it tonight if it was up to me. So I think, you know, you've come forward with a building. The tower element is not something that was fitting Mequon, and removing that sign from it in the last meeting was a wise choice. And I hope that we stick with that tonight, but I'll be curious to see what the other commissioners have to say.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just, yeah, I feel like Rob and I have had some good discussion in the last few meetings on this issue, and this business that is who's been here for decades, and who's trying to do some, you know, urban refill of a complicated site. I do not think the process has served us well in this case. Papula, okay, good. So if we just agreed with the motion that I'm thinking Rob would make, this is what we would end up with.
No,
It's not?
you wouldn't have the sign on the north side.
North-facing sign.
Okay, I'm talking about the tower, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm totally focused on the tower at the moment. And I think a lot of people are bothered by the building at the corner. And I realize that Rob and others are trying to correct the mistakes of the past. But in doing so,
No.
can I finish my thought, please?
Yeah, but
Okay, thanks. In doing so, we've shifted the building around, we've made them take this tower element around, and honestly, I think it is a frightful, if we approve this, I think that looks ridiculous. It's a staircase with an empty thing in the front. They've shown tons of examples, and I guess I will be proposing a competing motion just after I'm open to I think the wall sign that we're seeing here is unnecessary if we have a tower element. So I'd really like my planning commission members to have your own voice here as well, and say, do you want to be driving by this, or do we want to try to work with the applicant and have a corporate branded artistic element? I'm personally in favor of Exhibit B in there. I don't understand why we're cracking down so hard here. So, and I respect everything you've said, and I hope the other commissioners have a voice as well. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Stoker.
I echo your sentiments completely. I think that tower without a sign in it is hideous. I wish we had a slide of the no Associated Bank on the north face and no tower element. It's totally bastardizes the building to me if you don't have something in there. It's missing something. I would be fine with this. I would be fine with, you got to put something in the element. I think if you don't have some signage in there, if you can go back to that, it just is such a plain, what is it?
Exhibit B is what my motion would be for.
Yeah. And I would be okay with this without the north-facing sign.
Same.
And factually, I'd be okay with this without the north-facing sign and excluding the 57 square foot freestanding sign. And I assume, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to anyone from, I assume you guys would be okay with that as well, but to me, it's just missing something without that, some sign. And I do like this, the cube, better than the skinny lit sign. I think that's just a personal opinion, though. But I completely agree with you.
Mayor, may I just have a comment? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of discussions. It's either one or the other, sign or no sign. But I think there's another option there, and I think Commissioner Parrish did speak about it. I don't think staff would be opposed to some sort of artistic element in there. You know, we talked about potentially like some sort of metal sculpture hanging down that may be the inverse of their logo in metal, but not in green. You know, something that, and then subtly uplit or something like that. I think that still could be a possibility, and that would kind of add a little definition to that tower element.
So your community development standards, would you have recommended this if we didn't end up with this at the end of the process?
What's that? I didn't understand.
Would you have recommended an empty tower if we didn't end up with this?
I think versus this, yes. But if versus something else, then I think we would be open to something else there, just not a green, basically, signage piece. It would have to be something more subtle, something more architecturally, compatible with the building, and I think there are numerous things that could be done in there. So I just want to give that as an option as well.
I was thinking, when you look at that tower with nothing in it, I agree, there has to be something in it.
Could be lowered. Could be lowered, as
Well,
Commissioner Schaefer
we're beyond
points.
that.
He recommended that in the last meeting. They can choose to lower it if they want, if it doesn't fit.
But you need something inside there, and that, to Jack's comment, that's their brand, the green and the logo. So I don't have any issue with that being in there, but by that being in there, you certainly don't need the sign on the north. And I have an issue with monument signs because, over time, plants grow over them, snow piles up around them. I'm just wondering whether if you have the element inside the tower, whether you need, any other signs, or at a minimum, the one on the facing east. So I guess I'm echoing what you're saying.
I'm wondering why they designed it this way if it looks bad without something that we don't allow to be put in it.
Right.
It's not a problem we've created.
If I could speak to that, when we brought the building in, it did have that element in it, and it was removed as part of the last meeting. So it was designed with that piece in there.
Right, but we don't allow that.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood. But just to your question of why did we design it to be empty, we did not design it to be empty.
I think that palm tree in there would look good, especially in this climate. Commissioner Schaefer.
Suspended from the ceiling, possibly? So,
Line it up with flamingos.
agree. That was my initial reaction, is I feel like if you look at those three renderings, the one with nothing in it is garish, and I feel a little bit like it's intended to be so. You're right, you brought it forward with something, and it clearly is supposed to have something, and without it, it just looks, it is an eyesore. Are we past the point of being able to lower the tower? Because I think if it wasn't sticking up so high with nothing in it, it wouldn't be such an obvious miss. I do feel a little bit like we're being painted. I don't disagree. My problem is I agree with everything that's been said, but I feel like we're being painted a little into a corner, because if what we've approved is this tower at this height, nobody wants it with nothing in it, because that will detract from the standard that we're trying to establish. However, as we talked about at the last meeting when this came up, we already said that we didn't allow that. The way that this was set up was not allowed. So it's sort of like, well, you can either have this really ugly tower, or you can let us have our brand, that you make this exception for the way that we do our branding. Can we reduce the size of the tower at this point? Are we past that point?
No.
Well, again, that would be, we have an approved plan they can amend that plan, we can amend that plan, that's a possibility, but I agree with your point. You're almost, in order to approve the sign waiver, you need a hardship, and the hardship is what we approved last time, so we're actually kind of self-creating hardship, which is not the way it should be done. So I do agree with that. I don't think we can look at the architecture that was approved as the hardship, why it needs to be there.
Mr. Lemke.
I'd like to see something more subtle in there. I agree, empty's not right. I don't know if a green cube's right either. If we take away that, I've got no problem with the north-facing sign. I think that does make sense if you're traveling southbound. You're not going to be able to pick out that. I'd rather see the sign on the building than a monument sign. But the green cube at that height, it's over our height limit. I don't think that's something we should be approving.
You're suggesting that your customers identify that?
I'm sorry?
Well, of course
Your
they do.
customers will identify that cube as Associated Bank?
Yes,
Giant
in
logo.
the more than 10 years that we have been handling the Associated Bank account, I can only personally think of 3 branches that do not have some sort of element in the tower that have been,
Or it would be great.
All your banks have towers.
sorry?
All your banks have towers.
Well, I mean, there's banks that they purchased that were built prior to Associated Bank's ownership,
Yeah.
like the one next door.
We have one.
For example. But all of the ones that we have designed over the last decade, the tower is a predominant element. It's been in place for longer than I've been in charge of the account.
Okay. Commissioner Stark.
Rob was first.
You want to rebut what I say. I see it coming. I'd be more accepting of the north side sign lowered to 20 feet, and then with the gentleman's request that they lower that tower element based on a commissioner that's not here, that when that did get approved, he had an objection to the tower height and the offset. And then he also did mention when the logo was removed that should be lowered, but that didn't make it as a formal motion. And unfortunately, he was on the losing side of the vote, and that didn't go forward. But I would be more accepting to the 20-foot height on the north side than I would an illuminated cube that's significantly higher than any other sign that we've allowed in our city. And basically what we're doing is we're setting a precedent as a city. And you guys need to, whether you like it or you don't, you need to be aware that if you're going to vote for this tonight, this is going to be something allowable with every business that designs something that fits in a cube. And, I can design 100 things where this would look better in it than not. But does it fit the city standards? Does it fit our code? And really, what is your genuine reason for accepting it based on the fact that you like it or it has a strong fit or hardship on the client? There's no hardship for the sign. Staff has come forward with a recommendation that we don't approve it. And I'm forewarning you guys that every single person that wants to come forward after this is going to design a tower element with an illuminated something because Associated Bank got it. And I'm conceding where I didn't feel that they needed the north side sign, and I don't like the building, which I voted against it last month. But if the pulse on the commission here tonight is to allow them a sign so that people can see the building, I think that north side sign fits Mequon better than an illuminated tower, which we don't have anywhere else in the city. The corner building.
Commissioner Stoker.
I actually agree with some of that, Rob. So it's not going to be.
Winning.
A
Cool.
couple things I want to bring. So first of all, we keep referring to the building on the corner, and everyone says that it's the most hated building in Mequon, and I'm sure the city's heard 50 phone calls. I brought this up at the last meeting. If we have 25,000 people in the city, are there 50 people that don't like it, or is it 24,800 people? I think it's hogwash. There's people, yes, I'm sure there's people that complain about it, but there's people that complain about everything. Where I disagree with you, Rob, is that every other person that comes forward is going to be able to build a cube. There aren't other businesses that's their marketing brand. I don't think we're going to get this influx of buildings with these big staircases that want a big sign in it. So could it happen? It could happen. It could be 10 years, it could be 1 year, it could be 40 years from now. So that's not a big fear of mine. I don't think we're going to get this influx of buildings with these big stairwells with a monument sign or their corporate sign in there. I just don't think. If you can think of another example, I'll be shocked. Give me another company that can do that. That's the look they're looking for.
Best Buy did it in Menominee Falls.
Okay, I stand corrected. Give me another one.
I mean,
So at the
honestly,
end of the
every
day-
business has a
I wanna
logo.
bring- let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't think they can lower the north-facing sign to 20 feet. You have windows. Is that, I don't have a scale here. That the north-facing wall signs cannot be lowered to 20 feet, can they?
I think if staff approved that north-facing wall sign with the condition that it was lowered, we would probably try to
For the transom?
stand it up on the eave so that it was,
I'd be fine with
vertically,
that.
the letters would be standing up as they went down
And
the eave.
I don't know what I probably would struggle with that.
I like it on the building better, but
Right. So what I don't know is what the height is.
I'm
above
willing to
the
be
eave. Is it
flexible,
gonna
to be collaborative. However,
Right.
I have a really strong objection to that. And, with respect to what you said, every single company has a logo.
Yeah.
Every single company that wants their building to be the most visible on the corner. I mean, I spent 18 years in a strip mall on 11037 North Port Washington Road where every single sign was channel lit or was a box sign, all the same color, all the same ivory with black, and nobody knew. They'd drive right by you. I get it, and I respect that, which is why I'm being flexible here tonight. But I just think, the monument cube, there's no reason for us as a commission to approve it based on a hardship. And we need a reason, we need a justifiable reason so that somebody can't come forward later with a plan that we can deny, and then they can go to appeals where we don't have control over it, and Mequon gets it anyway. And that's how it works here, unfortunately. Because they came forward with a list of all the other buildings. Fortunately, their list was not really valid in comparison to their building.
Okay, well, I hadn't finished my point, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought
No
you were
problem,
done.
that's okay. So, for me, if we vote tonight without this, forget the north-facing sign, if we do not allow for the cube, it's in my opinion, we would, as a commission, we'd be making a mistake to not require them to lower the tower. So, I know this isn't their first choice. I personally would vote for that without the north-facing sign, particularly if we're going to make it down to 20 feet. I would prefer this without the north-facing sign, and I don't care about the freestanding sign, whether that goes in or not. If we're not going to approve this tonight, I would say we should make them lower the tower. I would also then approve lighting the band, give them some feel of what their corporate structure, again, not up 15 feet higher, but if we do lower it, then I do think it needs the north-facing sign. It's just my opinion. I don't like the idea of the north-facing sign going above that eave. I think it's going to get lost, and I don't even know if you're going to get it to work or not.
Well, it would certainly get lost in the snow, yeah.
So, again, it's semantics, and yes, Rob, I understand what you're saying. Again, I'm not fearful. You hate the building, I don't hate the building, so it's a
I'm trying to work with the
personal opinion.
signage. I'm beyond that.
I know,
That ship
I know,
sailed.
I know, but it's always going to be that way. If we got 8 planning commissioners, 2 people may love it and 6 may hate it, whatever the case may be. So that's my opinion. I think we should approve it with the cube. I don't like the upside-down palm tree idea. I'm not a big fan of a $50,000 chandelier in there because it does absolutely no good for them from a marketing standpoint. That's my opinion.
So can
Mr.
the
Baca.
applicant lower?
Yeah, I think what we're dealing with is, how do we give them differentiation in terms of their branding, not only in the city, but specifically at that particular point? I think with respect to what they are presenting here, the differentiation is overboard. It is something that I think we don't want to get into a situation which Rob has suggested, and that is, then everyone else is going to be dealing with differentiation. Doesn't have to be a tower. It can be differentiation in many, many ways. But I think that's the biggest risk we have. Someone used the word hideous. I'm not going to get into that. I'm getting more into differentiation. You know why they did that. I mean, if you ask them, they wanted to differentiate. That's what branding is all about, right? Exactly. And that really does differentiate it. But at the same point in time, does it do a disservice in terms of what Mequon is all about? And also, does it do a disservice with respect to other organizations that are near there, other banks? So my point is, differentiation is what they're actually asking for. And I think if you differentiate that point there, and agree to that, you are differentiating. You're opening up the proverbial box in terms of other differentiation opportunities for others, for other businesses.
What if you exchange the cube for the freestanding sign? No freestanding sign, no north sign, no illuminated band, but let them have the cube that everybody knows that's Associated Bank. They can see it from every direction.
I happen to agree with Rob. I think you're opening up, now I want to put up a clock tower at my business so I can put my logos up on top of it. You know, it's going to look better with the logo. I think putting something that green, that tall out of the specs of what we usually allow, I just don't think that's where we want to go.
You got a question for staff?
Well, I'm personally okay with artwork if that's the route we go, as long as.
If it's something more subtle, I'd be fine with that.
But if the applicant says that they're willing to lower the tower so that the height is conforming, and then we can meet their brand, then I think the problem's solved, isn't it? So, is that not work? I don't know the height, so I can't.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the height would be 20 feet. Is it?
I guess what is your question? The tower height or the?
What height
or
do
the
we need
lantern
to
height?
lower it to make it conforming?
Well, the tower height is conforming. A building height can be up to 42 feet in the B2 district. Signs can be at 20 feet. So if you're eliminating, I mean, right now the tower complies at the height that it's at because it's part of the building.
You're talking about dropping the sign?
I think the commissioners were talking about if you don't approve a tower sign, then you should reduce the height of the tower since it just is empty space if there's no sign inside. I think that was the conversation.
You got Mr. Chair. Who's first?
I think we have to recognize that the green and the logo are your brand. And I'm wondering whether you lower the tower and leave the green band, nothing inside the tower, not have the sign on the north, have the sign on the east, and no monument sign.
Well, they're moving backwards then. They're not going to agree to that. They're going to go with their approval.
I mean, yeah, I would not try to design this on the fly. If we're trying to look at different options, I would recommend tabling it and
I
then
just got a
bringing it back.
question for staff.
Go ahead.
Okay. Papula, for the north side sign, what would be allowable if that was the only sign on the building for square footage?
If it is the only sign, it is allowed, they did the calculation, it's 2.5% of the building facade. So what they propose at 57 square feet meets the size requirement, and the allowable height requirement is still 20 feet. So at the location, it would still need a sign waiver for the height, but the quantity, if it's the only sign, they would meet the number of signs allowed and the size allowed.
So how many square feet is it currently?
57.
57?
I think it's
And then how big is the other one again?
The other one, let me see here.
Talking about the east facing?
Yeah. 28.
The east elevation one.
Mr. Stoker?
Just another thought, and I'm just trying to get a feel for the commissioners. What if they lowered the tower to make it the same height of the rest of the building, and they kept that cube in there?
It needs to be slightly taller.
Okay. Or,
Just-
but I think
mean,
if they
even
lowered
that's
it, they
me
might be able to
saying
make
it.
smaller too, the cube.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing if anyone has a thought on that.
I
Be a
guess.
sunny spot.
I can make a motion if you
I
like.
guess I'd throw out another option of saying, give the waiver for the north sign at the height that it's shown there, and say something needs to go in the tower, but it needs to be more subtle. We're not redesigning the building then, we're just redesigning something that goes in there. Is that something,
I get,
I mean, I can picture something that mimics your logo, but is in metal instead of bright green. You know, I think there's something that could go there that would look good, and you'd still have your north-facing sign.
I really like the flowers along the bottom.
+1 on the flowers.
Commissioner Schaefer?
I would like to move to table this. I don't think, I mean, we can all throw out all of these different ideas. I think that what we're getting is you're probably not going to get approval for any of your, I don't want to, not everyone has spoken. I get the sense that it's going to be hard for us to come to an agreement on the different options that have been laid out as they are. So I think you've heard quite a bit of feedback about some of the concerns. Would it be, and you guys have already been patient because this has already been a few months of discussion on this. But we need to do the diligence to get it right so that it works for you and your brand and also for the city. If we table it, would it be something, do we then have further discussion? Like, I don't know if we are able to then give additional feedback such that it would guide you to work with staff so that you can come back and it could be a smoother process going forward. Is that
I would wait, table, have all the discussion first and then table it, yeah.
Well, I'm done discussing.
I got one question.
Everyone's got a different opinion.
Well, I'm willing to do the artwork in the tower for what it's worth, just to kind of compromise off my original comment and come to some consensus. It was the empty tower that was bothering me. And so I'm in favor of the project with some reasonable artwork that is agreeable to staff and staff's control.
With the north-facing sign.
Correct, with the north-facing sign. That's fine with me.
Go
ahead.
So, I got a question for you guys. So if I was making a motion, here's what I'd recommend. I'd recommend reducing the size of the north-facing sign to match the size of your other sign at 28 square feet. I would recommend lowering the tower to within 3 to 5 feet of building height, just so it architecturally stands out, or open for discussion if 6 or 7 feet above the facility works for you. I'd be open for discussion on illuminating it as long as it was a very dim illumination. I don't want to see it as a beacon in the city. I really would prefer to see it not illuminated. So I may change my mind in future weeks on that. But again, lowering the tower element, if you had some natural source of showing a cool logo in there, either out of like a cool wood or metal or steel or something like that, and that was artistically lit, I'd be open to that discussion. And then I'd recommend removing the, because you're allowed a variance on that, you wouldn't be allowed a monument sign in the future.
I would support that.
So my question for the applicant, would you be better off with that motion tonight? And then just come forward with final approval of just the building as it looks, or would you be more comfortable with it being tabled and then come back with a formal discussion? You know I've been very transparent with you on the phone, so you know exactly where I'm sitting on that.
Could you give us just a minute to clock us here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do we have to lower the tower height?
I would recommend lowering the tower height to within 3 to 5 feet of the building height. I don't think it should go parallel. It would look hideous architecturally, but. And the architect agrees.
And then what would go in the tower? Nothing?
Even if they came forward later with an artistic something out of metal that was cool and it wasn't a cutout logo.
Look like an abbreviated pine tree?
It can't be a cutout, right, single dimensional logo, but if they came forward with something that, was higher end, I mean, we could even just put the rubber stamp on that later, just bring that one item forward.
Globe.
I like your idea of metal. I mean, I think that'd be cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what we talked about. First of all, regarding the north wall sign, we believe that the letters are the same size as the east wall sign. It's just the way it gets measured comes out to more square footage. Did I get that right, Andrew?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
So we don't believe that the letter set on the north wall is any larger than the letter set on the east.
Well, there's multiple layers.
Could be different square footage.
Do you have a picture of the east?
I do.
Sign. It's just that it doesn't.
Oh, it's vertical?
It's too high and it's a second sign. That sets a precedent.
I think the way it's shown looks fine.
Just the height, because where are you going to put it otherwise?
Yeah.
Right.
Again, I know you're trying to come to an agreement, but I would hate to design this on the fly and then the final design doesn't look like what you think it was going to look. So it probably would be preferable to bring it back. I think, with the feedback they've got,
Okay.
I think they understand what's ahead of them. If you're going to look at adjusting the heights of the fonts or the tower itself, I would table that and bring it back another time.
My biggest concern is I just wouldn't want to see that north side sign be bigger than that one. And I'm getting cautioned, just on the height alone. I mean, that's not something that we should approve here. We should deny that as well, but
The other thing we talked about is our strong preference is to leave with something tonight so we can keep the project going, because we want to know that we've got a sign, because we're going to break ground, hopefully, in the near future. So our thought is, if we could get an approval for the north wall sign tonight, and then we will work with staff on coming up with an alternative for the tower. And if we can get agreement on the tower at the next meeting, then we would give up that north wall sign and put in a tower sign that hopefully staff and the commission would be agreeable to.
I think we're better off tabling tonight. Unfortunately, I know you want to walk away with something, but I mean, like, to give you an approval tonight, we'd be hoping to send you on your way, not to have you back next month to discuss all the same items. If we're going to do that, we might as well table it.
If we approve that north wall sign, there's nothing that stops them from going forward with the empty tower then at this point.
Well, it would come with a motion to lower the tower within 3 to 5 feet of the building height. I mean, I'd like to see that lowered anyway. I mean, I just think that.
Just take the table. Just take the table. Yeah, I think we'll just go with the table then.
Yeah, again, give you time to work it through, so.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to table. No, you talked about it.
Well, you let us have a little longer.
So there's a
Second.
motion and a second to table. Non-debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion tabled.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you for your time.
Mayor, I have to
I like the flowers.
recuse myself from the next item.
Okay. Moving on to the next item. ICAP Development for Jewish Home and Care Center.
He pointed it out last.
The applicant is seeking rezoning recommendation from IPS to B2 and concept plan approval to redevelop the site for multiple commercial uses for the property at 10865, 10911 North Port Washington Road, and the parcel to the south. Mr. Zader.
I have a new drawing that's not in your packet. This came in after the packet was assembled, so I'll try to explain it a little bit to you. Many of you may recall this was in front of us at our last meeting, and while there was, I think, consensus on the rezoning to the B2, we had this unknown regarding some specimen trees on the site and the quantity and quality. So we did table the item. There was also some other design considerations that staff that had recommended. So this plan in front of you is a little bit different than what you saw last time. This building here was shifted to the north in order to preserve the stand of specimen trees here. They did flip these two buildings to have the long front basically facing Port Road. They put the drive-through in the back. But we didn't really want to get into too many details on that until we kind of got your feedback on this specimen tree issue. This area here, they've GPSed the larger specimen trees on the site, and what you see out there is, and there's a report from City Forester who's sitting next to me, basically a stand of specimen trees. There's 15 specimen trees. 14 are in this area. There's one swamp oak that's kind of isolated down in this area, but this area has 14 specimen trees, and there's also 35 trees that, while they don't qualify on their individual basis as a specimen tree, as part of that larger ecosystem, they are considered specimen. So before we went any further with the applicant with regard to maybe some other site design issues with this building and the parking and some of the stuff that we looked at down here that's mentioned in the report, I think we needed to get feedback from the commission to determine whether this type and removal of specimen trees is going to be permitted with this project. If it's not, then some of the minor tweaks that we're looking at are somewhat meaningless. If it is, we'd still recommend having this tabled, and we'd go back and try to finish out those details. But it really wasn't worth having additional conversations with the applicant until we kind of got this all kind of ironed out with the commission. So our recommendation is to table the item regardless of the decision, but we're really looking for you as impact on whether you're open to removing that quantity of specimen trees on this site or not. And then at that point, we can take it from there.
Thank you, Jack.
Make a motion to remove from table to discuss it.
Second?
Second.
A motion second to remove from the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is before us. I guess my question would go to the forester. According to our ordinance, We can only authorize removal of trees where it will alleviate unreasonable difficulty or hardship.
That is correct.
I've seen nothing submitted here that there's any sort of hardship with developing this property. I mean, this property was developed. At one time, they tore the building down. You have 9 acres to work with here, quite a bit of Port Road frontage, so I don't see any hardship involved in developing this property. That said, we're always flexible when it comes to waivers that we do have authorization to grant. But that would require you to redesign a couple of these buildings, move around some of your expected uses. I don't know what they are. You haven't told us. So I guess in my opinion, the trees should stay. And in fact, according to our ordinance, they must stay. Mr. Chern.
I've spent some time looking at the site plan and understand that the tree issue. I drove around out there too, and I was playing around, and as an architect, I always have to try to improve things. And I was wondering whether if you took the building that was south of where the trees are and increased the footprint to gain the square footage of the building that's in the trees, you could save a good portion of those trees. Now, in the end, according to my calculations, you're going to lose about 13, 16 stalls, but for the most part, you could probably keep a lot of those trees that are now shown as being removed because of that north building. The other thing that I have a problem with is that west parking lot, it's all dead-end roadways. That aisles, that's terrible. And they're 10-foot stalls. What's that code?
Well, we do require 10, but we do have waived that in numerous cases to go down to 9. So by going from a 10-foot stall to a 9-foot stall, they'd pick up a pretty large number throughout the site. And we did also talk about, at a staff level, about having some sort of connection point over there. But again, until we kind of flushed this issue with the trees out, we didn't really want to get into that level of detail.
What I'm proposing, I think you're saving, not saving all the trees, but you're saving a good quantity of them.
If I can interject real quick. Jared Protaski, ICAP Development, good to see most of you that I saw last month, and again, new faces here as well. Dan Jasaric with ICAP as well. To Jack's point, we did submit our survey a little late by the time we were able to get out there with GPS to locate those trees, and I've got a few other things I'd like to hand out to you, and a jump drive that looks similar to this, but zooms in on a couple details that we'd like to talk to you about as you're considering this before we get too far down into other details.
I got like 6. Is this it?
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. So part of what we wanted to talk about tonight was not necessarily the buildings and how they are impacted by the trees so much as how the development of the site, not specifically with those buildings, is impacted by the locations of these trees. So what we've got shown here are two different colored lines. The blue line to the north is the current grading plan and utility plan. The stormwater for the site, regardless of how many buildings and how much parking is located to the northern portion, the western, eastern
portion of the site, there will be a stormwater detention pond that's necessary to capture stormwater from the site, and then to take that stormwater and put it into Port Washington Road, where we currently have storm sewer. What that blue line indicates now is where that water gathers in the pond and then flows out to the existing connection point into Port Washington Road. That distance is a distance of about 300 lineal feet of pipe that takes us over to that outflow. As you can see, it cuts right in between a large amount of the specimen trees to the northern portion of that tree stand, making it impossible for us to put that pipe in there without destroying those trees or potentially harming or killing those trees. The alternative location to that would be to then route that pipe around the south point, come back to the north, which adds approximately 400 lineal feet of piping to get there. In addition to that, the requirements of slope to make sure that that water flows correctly to get there, we'd have to take the wet pond that exists and bring that elevation up such that we've got a pitch to get 400 feet additional out of those pipes to get us to the northern point. And I'm sure you're saying, well, can we connect somewhere else? There are other MMSD regulations that, would restrict us as far as connecting to those pipes, and I'm not saying that it's impossible, but given the situation on site now, we're trying to utilize 3 existing outflows from the site that exists today to Port Washington Road. To minimize the amount of ponding we need on site, it's ideal for us to connect to the north. So there's a significant hardship that's created by those trees being in the way with the storm sewer and collecting water on site to be able to outflow back into Port Washington Road. In addition to that, if you look, the easy solution would be to run this in the northern access road, but even that northern access road creates quite a few problems for us as we run into protected zones with trees. There's a lot of other utilities that create conflict with locating that pipe there. So really, talking with our civil engineer, we don't see another solution to avoid those trees with the stormwater piping other than to do what's shown here in red. And to add that large lineal footage and regrade the site, probably increase the size of that wet pond, taking up more land on the property in order to decrease the depth, which is necessary to do our outflow we were talking about. If you turn to page 2 of the document, we've highlighted the existing gas and existing electrical that services this site. In addition to the solid red lines that are labeled gas and the solid red line that is for the electric, there's a dashed red line to the south. And if you go to page 3, I've blown that up so we can get a better view of it, as it's tough to see. The dashed line represents We Energy's easement through that area, which poses a bit of a problem for us to increase any service that would be necessary to develop the site to its full potential. To increase any electrical service, we would likely not be able to access the existing electrical line that's there due to the fact that the easement is exactly where those trees are located, again, causing a problem for us to do that work without destroying those trees or potentially damaging roots of other trees in those influence zones. That being the case, we'd likely have to bring a separate service into the site somewhere else. We haven't talked much with We Energies in regards to that. We have been out on site to assess where their overhead lines are, where their underground lines are. Their preferred point of bringing service to us is the existing service that is in this road now. So again, another conflict that's created here. And my last point here that doesn't have to do with density is that road. So if you look to the 4th page of this, I just took the street view from Google Maps of the existing road that's there, that northern access point, which is a shared access point with the senior housing that's to the north of us. This is on our property. It's an easement that is with that property owner there, that we have this shared access point. Not in the most ideal condition today as far as the pavement, obviously no curb and gutter that's there. You can see as it kind of makes its way through the trees, we've got a tunnel that's created there now, but in order for us to improve that road to adequately service any businesses that would be to the back of this, again, we'd run into a situation here where we'd be disturbing these areas of protection that we've outlined here. So a lot of things are kind of handcuffing us here with that northern access road and the northern portion of the site that aren't related to just the density of the development that we're trying to propose to you. So while I appreciate the ideas of trying to redo some things with the site plan and relocate some buildings, I guess our bigger problem here is that we have multiple conflicts with trying to run utilities, with trying to widen a road, that are presented here, that regardless of where those buildings are located, these are going to be problems with any sort of redevelopment of this property.
Your staff aware of that?
No.
You were not aware of
We
this?
haven't looked at any of this until now, so we haven't had a chance to evaluate any of it.
Right, okay. And these things are all located on the northern boundary, which affects some of the trees, but not all of the trees.
That is correct.
So I guess the thing would be for our staff to review this and bring it back, determine whether, there is a hardship to some extent for some of this, but still, the buildings that you have where the trees are, I mean, I guess I'm going to say that I see no hardship on your part of putting a building there, so, created by you wanting to put a building there. So that, the only issue that you brought up just tonight is the utilities. But it's not putting buildings in the trees, it's putting utilities adjacent to the trees. So, our engineer wants to say something.
Welcome.
I was hoping I wouldn't have to talk tonight. So
how you feel.
the hardships that are being displayed here are things that are all within the control of the development to change. So where they're locating their stormwater pond and how they're routing their pipes to the pond and to their outlet area, those are things that they have the ability to change and the ability to design around. Every site has unique constraints. This one would be no different. As far as the dry utilities of gas and electric, We Energies would be the entity to review those specific items. There were trees there when those lines went in. So either they directionally drilled them, somehow they were able to install those lines initially where they didn't impact the trees. So I'm not sure that the hardships that are presented are hardships. As Jack mentioned, we just saw this tonight ourselves, so we haven't dove into those particular items, and we certainly can.
And I would also add, if these are actual legitimate hardships because of the existing conditions, this is in our TIF district, and they are eligible for the fast track formula if they meet all their criteria to get those costs reimbursed. So if there's an issue with relocating a gas line or rerouting something on site, that is a TIF eligible expense and can get reimbursed for it as long as they meet the rest of the formula.
Okay. Thank you.
I certainly don't disagree with the fact that, yes, these are redesignable issues. It doesn't change the fact that there will be stormwater required to be detained on site, and it will need to be taken somewhere off-site. Regardless of that fact, it's going to increase the cost of what it costs to do that on-site. I do believe that is in itself a hardship, given the fact that the route that is the preferred, easiest, and most cost-effective route that is here is now prevented due to where the specimen trees are located. So while I do agree that we can redesign and there are things that we can change, it doesn't change the fact that there are significant financial implications to changing all of that.
You want to speak, sir?
Say a word. I'm a neighbor.
Yeah, use the microphone, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Name and address.
I am the person who has the easement on that driveway coming in, and it, hasn't been improved because this property's been up in the air for, a while now. And, but I just heard this stuff too. I don't quite understand the utility thing. I mean, first off, those lines were brought in for a prior building. I'd be shocked if they'd be in a spot that would be workable. Utility lines are always run into a building. That's interesting to me. But just as we run utilities in our streets throughout the community, utilities can run right down that driveway, which is plenty wide, and it wouldn't impact any trees either. So I'm just, again, I just heard this and trying to absorb it, but I'm a little confused by the logic, so, thanks.
Commissioner Strelcher?
I just do want to point out that, the definition of hardship is not in synonym with inconvenient. Hardship would mean that the site wasn't buildable at all. You may not get as much ROI out of the site, but, the city does have ordinances in place which, quite frankly, don't allow you to clear cut that entire grove of trees. So we're going to have to work around that on some level. And unfortunately, for you, this is a really great project. You'll need to work with staff to figure out what that means. I'm supportive, and my main question was, why can't you run down that street? That's that drive access is in poor shape already, and I have a sneaking suspicion that if it was improved and allowed for access to your property with a little nicer pavement there, that you'd be open to being inconvenienced while it was being torn up to move the stormwater down that line, which is a more direct route than the one that you have drawn through the trees at this time. You just have to go through those utilities, and if there's TIF funds available on that.
The DNR actually doesn't allow it. There's restrictions on how close the storm and sanitary sewers can run to one another. Hence the reason it's located south of the drive now, because of those restrictions, not necessarily.
Storm and sanitary sewer? Okay.
That's for staff to.
Staff can
Sorry, yeah, that is very much in the weeds here, but
and bring it,
nonetheless.
we're not going to solve that.
I think you're getting the pulse that grove, unfortunately for you, fortunately for the people around it that enjoy it, that will stay probably, at least on.
I think you need to work with staff to redesign the project to avoid the trees as much as they're willing to allow you to.
Mm-hmm.
Because we would, so.
Yeah, I guess the ultimate concern of the grove of trees, if we look at the street view of what we've got there, the preservation of 0.3 acres of isolated trees that have 15 specimen trees located in them, assuming that we can work around and not impact any of those trees in order to bring access into the site and utilities into the site. It still presents itself as a problem for us, as developments are now hidden behind these trees. I don't want to say that they're unsightly, but it's unkept right now. It's been unkept for 20-some years since it was left as a place to discharge wastewater from a parking lot that existed prior with the prior development. It's the number of trees that are in there that are specimen quality trees. While there are a number of them, there's also a lot of non-specimen quality trees that would be cleared out of this area, just from a landscaping and view standpoint, aesthetics of a development that would be here, and tenants that would want to locate on this site with those trees located there. That whole area would need to be cleaned up. I think it presents a hardship for us from the standpoint that we're cleaning up these trees to now hide a building behind. I think it limits the number of tenants that potentially want to be located here. You're taking away all visibility from Port Washington Road. While we're in agreement, it seems that makes sense to be rezoned to a B2 zoning. B2 zoning users are interested in that zoning. Sorry. Due to the visibility of Port Washington Road. Currently zoned IPS makes sense for a site that has these trees that are restricting visibility, but I think it's been shown that the site's been undeveloped for, 15 years now? Because there's not a user that's looking for an IPS zoning along here. There's users looking for a B2 zoning, and I think those go hand in hand with visibility. I think that the rezoning idea here is great, but I don't think it works with the visibility cut off by the trees as they are today.
Well, I think the property owner is responsible because they put the covenant on the property that couldn't be used in an IPS fashion. So basically what we're saying is the trees are an asset. I think the residents of Mequon view trees as an asset, especially at this part of Mequon. I think people would probably prefer to see trees than another commercial building. So I would encourage you to work with staff and see what you can do to redesign this project. Anyone else? I'd move to table.
Second.
Motion second to table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is, item is tabled. Encourage you to work with staff. Next item is policy, Chapter 58 of the zoning code.
Sorry. This is a request that came out of public welfare. I don't have it's all words anyway, so no graphics to show you on animals.
No pictures? No picture of a silky chicken?
No silky chickens, so.
Come on.
But this came out of public welfare when a resident requested to have a pet, a silky chicken as a pet, and Alderman World delved into our animal requirements and basically saw that they were somewhat convoluted, and so we spent probably a good 3-4 months working on basically wholesale changes to all our animal uses. I worked with him on some of the stuff in Chapter 58. Basically what this does is it repeals Chapter 6 of what had all the animal-related dogs, cat license, things like that. It's all been incorporated in Chapter 58 now. Most of the stuff that is in there is basically just codifying or clarifying our normal practice. There's been a few minor changes that were made as part of this ordinance that are listed in the report. The first one, horses, we allow a horse for 1.5 acres and a horse every acre after that. Now we've expanded that to all equine animals as well as sheep, goats, and llamas and others. So now that someone has 3 acres, they can have more than just a horse. That debate has come up numerous times, and numerous questions have arisen on phone calls from residents that said, I can have 3 horses, but I can't have 1 sheep. It doesn't make sense. So we try to clean that a little bit up. We also have now a list of pets, what are allowable pets in the cities. This includes the silky chickens and other smaller animals that most people do have as pets, but now it's just kind of quantified in the code. We also added bees and raptors as well as allowable with certain conditions in the city. We have not a lot of raptor requests, but from time to time we have had requests for people to have bees in their yards for honey producing. So we put a requirement in that for that as well. We did get rid of some of the commercial farming conditional uses, and many of you that were with me on the conditional use panel that we're still working at, these are the same uses that we would have removed as part of that process, which is still ongoing. So that kind of helps us with that going forward, that these will all be removed. We did add some language for dog runs and dog houses. We didn't have anything in the code regarding that, so we put some language in there that allows them only in the rear of the yard, somewhat similar to what we did for the chickens and where their coops could be and things like that. And then the last item is that for miscellaneous pets, if someone has a miscellaneous pet that's not listed in the ordinance and they want to have it as a pet, this gives them an avenue to go to public welfare, and then they can discuss whether that is an appropriate pet to have or not. So we don't have to do a text amendment every time someone comes up with a pet that we're not familiar with. So those are some of the major changes to the code. Again, this went to public welfare. It will go to Common Council for first reading tomorrow, and then up for public hearing in April.
No action required on our behalf?
We have to make a recommendation still. It is in 58 for that part of it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to recommend. Do you have?
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay.
With regard to bees, was the intent 5-acre density or 5-acre parcel? It says 5-acre parcel on there currently.
It was parcel-based. I thought, though, let me just check, because I thought we reduced that. We did reduce that in the chart, so unless maybe there's somewhere where it hasn't been reduced, because we're allowing bees 1.5 acre minimum lot size.
Okay, good.
Two hives per acre.
Okay.
So that was changed.
I misread that then. Yeah, perfect.
And you changed something with greenhouses?
Well, there was always that section in our code we allow like garages and other storage structures, but then there was this also language regarding agricultural type uses, but you were still residential, and we had these issues, I don't know if you remember the Mick issue where there was, he wanted a large agricultural building but didn't really have any agricultural uses. This kind of cleans that up and basically just says if you have a residential property and you don't have any agricultural uses, you would still be allowed if you wanted a residential greenhouse limited in size, but you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the architectural or the buildings for agricultural unless you actually had a legitimate agricultural need. So if you did have 4 horses, you could still have a building, something to house the horses or other animals, but you couldn't just put up a 1,000 square foot shed and say, I'm storing my dog food in there. So that wouldn't be allowed. So we kind of cleaned that language up. We were interpreting that way for a while, but it really wasn't all that clear in our code.
My question was on greenhouses. I think you changed the parcel size to allow commercial greenhouses or
10 acres.
Commercial greenhouses,
or
that should,
wholesale greenhouses?
that should be 10 acres or more still. I don't, we originally had the ability to do it on smaller properties, but we've, unless
If you
I'm
have a
thinking.
greenhouse that exists today, you're grandfathered regardless of what we do.
Yes, if you have one now.
Okay, fine. That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Mr. Parrish?
Yeah, I think staff did a really nice job on this whole write-up. The one paragraph that kind of makes me stop is the horse and equine animals.
Okay.
So does that mean that if my neighbor's house is 2 acres, as an example, that they could have like a goat or an alpaca or an emu or any essentially kind of animal?
A donkey.
Based on this change?
They could have one.
Yeah.
They could have had a horse before, and now they could have something
I
else.
forgot about that, and I was shocked just to recall that we could, in a 1.5 acre site could have a horse, and I don't even think I don't even know why that's allowed, to be honest.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of requests. I mean, usually they want to be together, so I think the smallest that I'm aware of is about 2 to 3 acres of a site that has horses on it.
But with what we're doing tonight, like my neighbor or anyone.
This would add, this would add the
all these
ability.
crazy animals here in Mequon, and I think that we're a rural community.
Which ones are
And I
crazy?
think there's plenty of 5 acre parcels that, for this type of animal. I just can't imagine.
If you can have a large dog, what's the difference between that and having a sheep in your backyard?
I don't mean to create classes of animals. But
Maybe if it was made of metal.
I just find it crazy that we're arguing about like logos and signs, and we're allowing emus in my neighbor's property, so.
Kangaroos.
But I think Alderman Worth, his justification was because we were allowing horses, why are we just limiting it to horses and not others? I mean, if the commission wants to make a recommendation that we eliminate all those.
Horses should be like 3 acres
Yeah,
or something. larger,
again, if you
but-
want to make, that's a recommendation you could make at this body, but we kept it at the 1.5 to be consistent with the horse requirement. And normally, I said all the years, most of the requests I get, people have like 2 to 3 acres and they want to just have, 1 or 2. It's usually not somebody that has 1.5 acres that I hear from.
Just
that-
1 or 2 goats.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
I think we had one issue, a couple number of years ago, we had one issue with this horse thing. And they moved.
Well,
Yes.
if none of my other planning commissioners have any objections to these types of animals, then I'll definitely vote in favor of it.
I'm open for discussion.
I'm totally opposed to that specific piece of it.
The goat on an acre and a half.
Surprised this has come up before. I don't know if it's that the gentleman was being there. I don't remember when it has come up. I'm already loud.
There you go.
I actually always wondered why it was such a small parcel. Because 1.5 acres in Mequon, there's an awful lot of houses that have, in what I would consider very residential, not rural areas, that have that as their lot. So it surprises me. I'm not prejudiced against them like others on the commission might be, but I don't necessarily want them in my neighborhood. I think that's I think that's surprising. So if we're going to review it right now, perhaps this is the opportunity to say, is that an appropriate acreage to have, animals that are traditionally more of an egg, that would be more traditionally in a more rural area? 1.5 acres it's not a huge parcel of land. And that would just be allowed. So you said, yeah, there's been a couple of issues, but there's nothing to stop someone from coming and being in pretty residential area and saying, but I can have this horse or whatever else Commissioner Parrish doesn't want to have as his neighbor.
Donkey.
Yeah, I mean, I
Keeps the
wouldn't.
coyotes away.
You're limited, the horse is going to be limited on having someplace to keep it.
You would hope if, yeah.
Right. So I don't.
Let them walk around.
Yeah, I don't think
In your
that's an
yard.
issue. And honestly, goats and, I mean, there's little goats, there's
I know,
little sheep. I see 4-H kids that probably have a pygmy goat on an acre lot, and I don't see that as being an issue. If you can have a large
A
dog.
potbelly pig.
I
Yeah.
might be biased. I had a pet goat when I was a kid.
I love goats, so I'm saying.
God, here we go.
I'm just,
I just don't, I think we're trying to solve something that's not a problem.
You just don't want it to become a problem. Because, I mean, there was a point at which in Mequon, an acre lot was the minimum. So there's an awful lot of residential area where it's an acre or slightly larger in which you'd be able to have, in which this would just be allowed and we wouldn't be able to talk about it. And then and I agree with you, Rick, I wouldn't,
Acre and a half.
Yeah, you gotta have an acre and a half before you can have your first horse.
right, but I'm saying that's not unusual in Mequon, is what I'm saying.
It'd be unusual to have a barn that could house a horse on an acre and a half.
They're not saying you have to have it in a barn, though.
Well,
I don't know. I again don't want to cause a problem where there's not, but if this is the time that we are reviewing this, it would also be a good time to look at that aspect if it's something that we choose to do. But Rob has something.
I got a question. So is there any consideration given to, like, I think the biggest concern is that, like, you've got that one neighbor in a 1 acre density subdivision and they've got 1.51 and they want a donkey on their yard. And I'm not sure that would be fitting. So I guess at what point, like, we've approved it, at what point do the people that already have them become non-compliant? You know, that would be my first worry, is just to over-legislate here when they, I know how much time they put forth on this at public welfare. I do agree with Commissioner Parrish that 1.5 acres is kind of small to have, like, goats and sheep cruising around your yard. I mean, and then again, I got 2 dogs, so really what's the difference between 1 sheep and my 2 dogs that I'm yelling at constantly to not run off by the coyotes?
Yeah, I mean, even before we looked at this change, we felt the acre and a half for a horse is small, and especially if you're going to have 2.5 acres always made more sense to where you should, you know, where it should kick in at the 2.5 acre level. If somebody has an existing situation, they grandfathered in, the hardest part is we don't really permit those, so we don't even know who has what in terms of horses, unless they come in for approval for a barn or some sort of structure to house them. But we don't really keep track of how many people actually have horses. But my guess is I can't believe there's very many that have, on an acre and a half parcel, that have horses. So I don't know by changing that number if you're really going to impact anybody.
I wouldn't want to see it in a platted subdivision, so I'm going to add just one thing, you know, just that as this goes to council, this becomes a discussion item. We're going to recommend to council, you know, this forward to council, but we'd like the discussion item of, like, acreage on horses and goats just to take into consideration and enter discussion on situations where it'd be in a platted subdivision. You know, the subdivision, like Hawthorne Road, if you got an acre and a half lot on Hawthorne Road, have a horse all day long. I mean, you got access to ride up and down the road, and you've got neighbors that probably have them too.
Well, I guess I would, I guess, caution on doing it with regard to a platted subdivision, because that is a technical term that you could have a CSM, you know, a row of houses that looks like a platted subdivision, but it's just multiple CSMs that are technically not platted. And that's the kind of language we're going to be looking at in terms of that requirement. So if you're going to make a recommendation, I would look at recommending something maybe other than the acre and a half, more, or keeping it the way it is. It's hard to get into the issue of platted versus non-platted because, again, that's a technical thing, and that it may not accomplish what you're actually looking for it to accomplish.
Then my only other concern would be multifamily.
Yeah, this would not apply because I don't believe that it applies to other than the residential districts up to R4.
Okay, good.
And most subdivisions have a homeowners association, and they would not allow you to have a donkey.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or they would.
I'm not in
Could be the donkey
I'm not in a
section.
homeowners association, but I am on a 1 acre lot, and I think a lot of people in Mequon are. And
Right.
So I'll have to vote.
It's not 1.5, though.
I'm sorry, 1.5.
You're on 1.5?
No, I'm 1, I can't have one. But my neighbor can, he's 2 acres, so. I don't know if the person who made the amendment would reconsider going to something higher, or you just want to keep it as is, and I'll just vote no, either way.
2.5? I mean,
I'd like to see a difference made between a horse and a goat and a size issue. I mean, I understand an acre and a half seems small for a horse, but again, you may have kids that have 4-H small goats that are smaller than your dogs. I don't see why they can't have that.
Well, I know some other communities have like animal units, and that would cause a lot more going back to the drawing board and working on this. So it's up to you. I mean, I know they were looking for it to bring it to council, but if you want to, you can approve it with change the conditions, or you can want to see it again. So
it's 1.5 acres, you're allowed one.
One.
One of
Okay.
any of those.
And
Anything.
you don't want your neighbor to have one?
I think a lot of the Mequon residents
Well,
would
let's not
want
make
these
it
types
personal.
of animals as their neighbors, respectfully.
yeah.
So
I would recommend to accomplish what you're trying to do, make a secondary motion, and I'll second whatever you make, just for the sake of a vote to
Okay.
have your voice heard.
Thank you.
You have a motion and a second to approve.
That's
but
right, to
if he makes a
recommend.
secondary motion to amend the motion, then we can talk about whatever that is.
It's just, and that's a random number, so I'll say 3 acres.
Well, we have a zoning category of 2.5.
2.5, I would go 2.5
2.5
because we don't have a
acres is fine.
3-acre zoning category.
Your neighbor's not
second
going to
that.
like
Good
you.
compromise.
Yeah, I'll
He's
second
out
that.
shopping for goats right now.
I'm worried about.
Okay.
Do you want to vote on the amendment then?
So
Yeah.
we have an amendment to equines on 2.5?
Yeah.
Well, it's the equine sheep, and that's where Rick's point comes in.
Equine and,
sheep, goats, llamas.
Emus.
Equine,
Okay, that's-
anything
and it's
equine.
listed here 'cause it's not listed, but
Emus are.
All right, call the roll
they're birds.
on the amendment.
Is it just on the amendment?
just
Yes.
on the amendment currently.
Commissioner Chorin? Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker?
No.
Commissioner Parrish?
Aye.
Commissioner Lemke?
No.
Alderman Stralcheck?
Aye.
Mayor Abendroth?
No.
Vote passes 5-3. All right?
Okay, now we have the main motion.
As
with
amended.
Equines restricted to 2.5 acres.
Wait, say that again.
That's what we just.
The amendment passed
We're making the amendment passed, so we're making a motion to approve with the amendment as
with the
passed.
amendment.
All right.
So equines on 2.5 and everything else the same. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? There, we all got along that time.
Sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
That's okay, you made a good point.
This goes to council, though, and then it'll be.
Yes, it'll go to council.
Can we restrict dirt bikes?
No.
No.
Dirt bikes?
Yes, we probably should.
Okay, announcements, we have changes from Freighter Hospital.
Yeah, I just put something in the packet. Freighter made some design changes to their neighborhood hospital. I did share it with the mayor and Jim Schaefer, Commissioner Schaefer, the architect on the commission. They both were in favor of the changes. They thought they were a vast improvement. It was just an FYI to give you kind of showing what it looks like, so that if when you see it being built, you're going to wonder why we approved it that way. We did get some feedback, so just to let you know.
They subdued the colors, which actually makes the building look better.
Yeah, I think it's a vast improvement.
That's what I noticed.
Didn't they change from colored siding to brickwork?
Yeah, it's a material change too. It's a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well done.
it's a more quality looking building, in my unprofessional opinion.
Very professional.
Next meeting, Monday, April 8th. All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. April 8th.